The Rolling Stones are not only one of the largest rock and roll bands to ever hit the air, but they have also been around for the longest. The band, which began as blues enthusiasts in 1962, has released 31 studio albums and a history spanning more than 60 years. Of course, there have been a few errors and poor choices throughout that amazing run of records. Looking back, Keith Richards, the band's guitarist and lunatic, finds one especially dubious era of the group. The Rolling Stones seem to be limited to blues rock and R&B, when the group of eccentric rock and roll musicians originally came together in 1962, led by Brian Jones. But the group's sound evolved as they gained notoriety during the British invasion, and eventually assimilated into the counterculture. However, their music was still heavily influenced by the blues for the most part. As seen by their most recent album, Hackney Diamonds, the group has continued to be influenced by this artist. The 1960s were a dynamic period for music, art, and drugs, of course, even with their unwavering devotion to the blues. With the introduction of LSD and other psychedelics, apparently limitless sources of creative inspiration appeared. With the advent of bands like the Birds and Cream, psychedelic rock emerged as the signature sound of countercultural music towards the end of the decade. This psychedelic influence would soon become well-known and influential, even influencing bands like the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. The Beatles' psychedelic era, on the other hand, is perhaps their best known, with hits like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and Revolver. Conversely, the Rolling Stones' forays into psychedelic music were not nearly as well received. The band briefly abandoned blues music in lieu of mind-bending, tripped-out psychedelia for their psych rock album, Their Satanic Majesty's Request. Although many fans consider the album to be their favorite, the band was not quite persuaded. Richards discussed that time in the band's history in a 2015 interview with The Guardian, stating, "God, that year, 1967, the effect of LSD on people's music and lives. Individuals quitting and moving to India, and the Maharishi," alluding to the Beatles' journey to India, where some of their best songs were composed. The guitarist said, "I just saw people losing their thread. That year, we all went off the tracks." It was a rather crazy trip, though their fit for psychedelic rock was not as great as that of some of the other bands involved. Their Satanic Majesty's Request is nonetheless an incredible and sadly underappreciated album. Richards did, however, seem relieved that the band's psychedelic phase lasted only one album. The next year, he said, "We made Beggars Banquet, and I thought, okay, holes are over, old boy. Let's get back to business." The Stones seldom ventured back into psychedelic territory after Beggars Banquet, always reiterating their commitment to blues music. If the band had kept going after their Satanic Majesty's Request, it would have been intriguing to watch how their music evolved, but it's hard to be upset with the follow-up, which opens with Sympathy for the Devil, the band's magnum work.